Next on the hit parade, sharpening images and reducing noise in digital images. Let's take this one here, hold the control key down, pick up this one. Notice what that is? That is not a raw image. I just want to prove a point here. You can open JPEGs and TIFFs inside of RAW. There are a few things, even like sharpening, that you can probably do better here. But this will require a right click, not a double click. Open in RAW. And there we go. This is the one we're going to talk about on focus, but let me say something before we get started. This is a two-dimensional negative, not the three-dimensional world. If an image, when it was shot, was taken out of focus, the only way to bring it into focus is to go back in time and take the photograph again and twist your lens until it's in focus. What we do, and what we have been doing in Photoshop for 20 years, is simply faking everybody out by creating what I call lines of force between edges. So we see a more distinct line between something. We go, oh, that's in focus, that's the edge. That's all we've been doing. But with that said, the Camera Raw does have some pretty cool sharpening features for RAW or TIFFs. First thing, let's go here and make a snapshot of the original before we change anything. So click the new button down here and we'll call it original. All right, so we got that one we can always come back to see the before and the after. Let's click this button and go into our basics. I don't like her color tone. I think her white balance is off. There's a problem. This is not a raw image. What do you mean? Well, I don't have nice little cute little things like tungsten. I've got to figure this out for myself, and my color temperature doesn't run in Kelvin. It's just numbers from 100. She's high on the saturation because of those yellow tones. We need to go down. So I'm going to come here, and we're just basically doing this with a calibrated monitor, and we're going to bring that down a little bit. We're going to give her a little bit more in terms of a negative number, actually not more. And let's give her a little bit more exposure in terms of darkening her up a bit. I think that looks better. Let's make a snapshot of that one too. Come over here, and we'll call this one white balance. All right. So we've got our original, and we have this one, which looks a whole lot better. That's the one we're going to use. Go to this button right here. It looks like a little pyramid. Sharpening and noise reduction. We'll do sharpening on her. We'll talk about noise reduction on the other image. My amounts and everything are set to defaults for a TIFF or JPEG. You get 25 defaults on a raw image. There's nothing here because it assumes it may have already been pre-sharpened. What do? Well, start playing around. The amount, think of amount like a volume control. That's really what it is. Dialing up the volume of sharpening. If I go all the way, you can see everything looks quite in focus in a sense, but it's overly sharp. It looks phony. In this case, let's run amount to about, let's try about 70%, somewhere around that general area. I go usually on a portrait something between 40 and 70. So we're going to run 70 for now. We may adjust that later. Radius, what's that? Radius is how many pixels in width to use to create the halo effects around the edges that make my eye say, oh, it's in focus. And we can go to 3. As you can see, it does begin to make things look a little bit softer in these areas, a little bit harsher in some of the other areas. And of course, we can go back down. I want that about a 0.7. Let's go about a 0.7 on that. Not a lot. Usually don't use a lot of radius. What's detail? Radius is causing these halo effects to appear around the sharpened areas. Detail helps to limit them so the eye doesn't see them as well. And we can use detail. If we go this way, we're actually creating 100% detail. And you can see it looks sharper. If we go this way, it's bringing it down, so we're losing the halo effects. We're going to go about 25% on this one. Again, all images will be a little bit different, but these are pretty good standards to work with. What's a mask? A mask is basically limiting what areas get the focus. And in this case, those focused, or I should say sharpened areas, are more limited with masks if you increase it in the areas like here. And you can see if I do this, these areas begin to look a little bit smoother. Now, we don't want to go to 100%. That's almost like losing everything. We're going to run about, let's try around 40-ish on that. Let's try about 40%. All right, so we're successfully attempting to sharpen the image. Let's go back here and let's create one more new one, and we'll call this sharpened. I like being able to do these. All right, so here's our original, and here's our sharpened. See, not a lot. It's subtle. If your image is overly out of focus, throw it away. You're not going to be able to do much with it. But notice the details on our eye right about there. If we come back to the original, see they look softer there. They look more in focus here. The sharpening feature in Camera Raw creates the illusion of being sharper. I mean, it's all going on in my head, up in my mind, but it does a pretty good job. Let's look at noise reduction. I'm going to open up this image here. What you're looking at is a photograph of a blue moon. And if you know that term, that's 2 full moons in 1 month. This one was shot in January of 2010. The occurrence of blue moons in January, the first month of the year, is rare. It's about every 10 years or so. And if you see one, it's supposed to bring you good luck. So I had to go out and take this image. Now, it was partially in cloud, which was kind of sad. But it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like 20 below zero outside. I'm taking a picture to prove I was there. Noise is what we're talking about. The reason I chose this image, images like this do generate what we call digital noise. And the easiest way to see that is if we make it bigger. So let's go ahead and zoom in on, say, this patch right there. And this noise is what I want to get rid of. Can't see it too well when the image is small. When you blow these things up or you print them, that's typically when your eye can make this stuff out. So it is important to get rid of the noise without getting rid of the details of the image. What we're going to do is noise reduction. You have luminance and you have color noise reduction. Luminance is primarily what we need. If we were working with an image of a face, we would probably go more to color than luminance. Luminance works good with these big blank areas. Watch what happens to the noise up here when I begin working with luminance. Well, it begins going away. But if you'll notice, now this is up over 200%, so that's why these look a little bit out of focus, because it's blown up. But it's not impacting any of those trees. We're basically getting exactly what we want. Now, we got detail, we got contrast. If I'm working with a portrait, like Pretty Woman, the one we worked on earlier for sharpness, and I wanted to reduce noise, then it would be important for me to keep some of the details and some of the contrast while still preserving that smoothness. I don't need any of these, either of them, I should say, in working with that sky, because it's one big solid color, really. So I wouldn't worry about these two. With color, again, the same thing. If I'm working with a lot of varying colors, like on a face, I would work with the color one in conjunction with luminous and use a little bit of color detail to bring it back in again. But as you can see, just simply by moving luminance over, shutting down detail and contrast, if you've got those night sky photos that are full of all those multicolored pastel little patches of color, this is a very, very easy way to get rid of them and yet still maintain the perfect clarity of the image. Sharpening and noise reduction, courtesy of Camera Raw.